So today we'll understand the role of calcium as secondary messenger. Before we actually see what is the role of calcium as secondary messenger, a question definitely should come in your mind as to why calcium has been chosen for this particular task. Why calcium has been given this responsibility. Okay, there are different ions also. So we have magnesium, we have sodium, we have potassium, we have chloride, we have bicarbonate. But why calcium has been chosen for this particular task? What is the task? Calcium is being chosen to work to act as a secondary messenger. Okay, so there are reasons. Let us understand what are those reasons. In the first place, see, calcium, intracellular calcium level has to be kept low. It is about 100 nanomolar. If you remember, we have discussed it earlier also. The level of calcium in the cytoplasm is typically 100 nanomolar, right? So why it has to be kept low? The reasons are, if you can analyze it, we have large number of phosphate esters in the cytoplasm, phosphate esters. These phosphate esters are synthesized as an intermediates of various metabolic pathways. What do you mean by phosphate esters? Phosphate esters means glucose 6-phosphate, fructose 6-phosphate, fructose 1,6-bisphosphate. Okay, wherever you have this phosphate groups attached, adenosine triphosphate, adenosine diphosphate. So these are all phosphate esters. So we have large number of these phosphate esters available present in the cytoplasm. And these phosphate esters can always combine with calcium to form calcium phosphate. And this calcium phosphate is insoluble. Okay, so what does it mean? It means if the calcium level in the cytoplasm is high, then you have more chances of forming these calcium phosphates. And calcium phosphate being insoluble, it can create trouble. So you can imagine a small stone in the kidney is so painful. The one who suffers from it only knows what kind of pain it gives. And that stone is made up of these kinds of insoluble salts only, calcium phosphate, calcium oxalate, and things like that. So for this particular reason, nature has chosen calcium to be kept at a very low concentration of the order of nanomolar only within the cytoplasm. Please understand, I am repeating it once again. In your cytoplasm, the cytoplasm of the cell, you have large number of these phosphate esters. What are those phosphate esters? Glucose 6-phosphate, fructose 6-phosphate, adenosine diphosphate, adenosine triphosphate, fructose 1,6-bisphosphate. These are all examples of phosphate esters. So these phosphate esters, they can combine with calcium to form calcium phosphate, which is insoluble, and it can create large number of problems. So to avoid this eventuality, what nature has done, nature has intentionally kept the level of calcium very low. And this particular challenge, has been converted into an opportunity. So 100 nanomolar is too low a concentration. So any increase, a small increase, gives you a big effect. So from 100 nanomolar to 500 nanomolar, if the calcium level increases in the cytoplasm because of the opening of calcium channel, so calcium flux in, there is a influx of calcium level rises. So this rise in calcium level gives a big trigger. From 100 nanomolar to 500 nanomolar, it's a big difference, but the amount of calcium ion required is not very high. Okay, so it gives a big trigger. So this has been taken. This is the advantage that has been exploited of having calcium low in the cytoplasm. What keeps calcium ion concentration low in the cytoplasm? Please remember, there are two things. One is you have calcium pump, calcium ATPase, we have discussed earlier, which pumps calcium out against a concentration gradient. Outside calcium is more, inside calcium is less. So calcium is being continuously pumped out, and there is a sodium calcium exchanger. These two are working continuously day and night. Doing what? Keeping the calcium low in the cytoplasm. Okay, so those low calcium, very low calcium, you can say, is an opportunity, because any small increase in the level of calcium gives you a big reflection, gives you a big trigger. So, from 100 to 500 nanomolar, it is a trigger for muscle contraction. Actual amount of calcium that is required for raising the level of calcium from 100 to 500 nanomolar is low, because we are talking of the nanomolar concentration, right? Had it been in millimolar, you would have required a massive influx of that particular oil, but this is in nanomolar, and therefore this has been exploited. The second reason is calcium ions have an unusual ability. It can coordinately linked to 6 to 8 oxygen atom. Atoms of negatively charged amino acids like glutamate, aspartate of proteins. Okay, so calcium ion can coordinately link to anywhere between 6 to 8 oxygen atoms of negatively charged amino acids like glutamate, aspartic acid of proteins. So that means, what does it do? Calcium can, interact with different parts of a protein. It can interact with different parts of a protein. Like this. 6 to 8 different locations, it can interact like this. So, okay, and since it can interact with 6 to 8 oxygen atoms of different glutamate and aspartic acid residues of protein, it is capable of inducing a large, it is capable of inducing conformational change. So the chances of inducing a conformational change by calcium becomes higher because of its ability to bind to different parts, different sections, different regions of a polypeptide chain, because it can interact with 6 to 8 oxygen atoms of glutamate and aspartate amino acids of that particular protein. So it helps in bringing about a conformational change. The conformational change in protein can take place more radially. So it is for these two reasons calcium has been chosen to act as a secondary messenger. Okay. So please remember, one is that calcium has to be kept low within the cytoplasm because it can form insoluble calcium phosphates, and therefore any small increase in the level of calcium serves as a trigger. And second is this, that it can coordinately linked with 6 to 8 oxygen atoms of protein, different parts of protein wherever aspartate and glutamate are there, and it facilitates the conformational change. So for these two reasons, calcium has been chosen as a secondary to act as a secondary messenger. Now within the cell, there are calcium sensory proteins. Calcium sensory proteins. These proteins are responsible for sensing the level of calcium. Okay, as the name suggests, these proteins are responsible for sensing the change in the level of the calcium. One most common, one most important calcium sensory protein within the cytoplasm is called as calmodulin. Calmodulin. Okay, calmodulin. It's a 17 kilodalton protein, small molecular weight protein, and it is responsible for sensing the level of calcium. There are other calcium sensory proteins also, for example, troponin C. There is one more, parvalbumin. These are all examples of calcium sensory protein, but in humans, this calmodulin plays the most significant role. This is the most common calcium sensory protein which is present in the cytoplasm. This calcium, all these calcium sensory proteins, they are members of EF hand protein family. They are members of EF and protein family. What does it mean? It means that they have this particular motif, EF and motif. All of them are characterized by the presence of EF and motif. Okay, so you don't have to go into the details of this right now. Please remember this calmodulin, this parvalbumin, troponin C, these are all calcium sensory proteins, and they are members of a family of proteins called EFN protein family. And why they are called as EFN protein family? Because these proteins, they have a EFN motif in it. Okay, this calcium calmodulin, for example, it's a small molecular weight protein. It is characterized by the presence of two globular heads. Joined by a long alpha helix. Total length is around 65 angstrom. So if I have to draw a picture for you for the sake of understanding, it would look like this. This is the alpha helix, and then these are the two globular heads. The total length is around 65 angstrom. Each globular head has got two EF ends, motifs. So there will be two EF end over here, and there will be two EF end over here. So in all, there will be 4 EF ends. And each EF end can bind, if you want, you can write down each EF end can bind one calcium ion. It has got a binding site for one calcium ion. That means calmodulin can bind to 4 calcium ions. Okay, 2 on this side. If I have to just draw it for you, you can write down calcium. So calcium calmodulin can bind to 4 calcium ions. When calcium ion concentration is more, then all these 4 sites will be occupied by the calcium ion, right? So let us see what happens. So when the calcium level in the cytoplasm goes from 100 nanomolar to 500 nanomolar, okay, what happens? All the 4 sites of calcium calmodulin are occupied. Okay, this is the threshold. The calcium level has to go has to go up to 500 nanomolar. Then only you will see that all the four sites, all four EF and motifs, they are all occupied by the calcium ion. Okay, and this activates the calcium calmodulin. And this activated calcium calmodulin in turn activates, modifies the activity of large number of enzymes, channels, regulatory proteins, etc. Okay. One important enzyme which is activated by calcium calmodulin is called as calcium calmodulin dependent protein kinase. In short, it is called as CAM kinase. In short, it is called as CAM kinase. CAM kinase 2. This is an enzyme. This is a kinase which is also activated by calcium calmodulin. And this CAM kinase in turn is responsible for regulating fuel metabolism, it regulates fuel metabolism, neurotransmitter synthesis, and release. Neurotransmitter synthesis and release, and ionic permeability. Ionic permeability. So this is how calcium, will exert its effect. Calcium will exert its effect within the cell. Calcium will be sensed, the level of calcium will be sensed by a calcium binding protein, calmodulin. Structurally, these proteins are characterized by the presence of an EF end motif. This calmodulin has got 4 EF ends. Each EF end can bind to one calcium. So when the calcium level goes up from 100 nanomolar to 500 nanomolar, all the 4 EF ends are occupied by calcium, and this activates the calcium calmodulin. Activated calcium calmodulin in turns, modify the activity of large number of enzymes, channels, regulatory proteins. One important enzyme which is activated by calcium calmodulin is CAM kinase 2. CAM kinase 2 in turn, activated CAM kinase 2 in turn is responsible for regulating fuel metabolism in the cell, neurotransmitter synthesis and release, and ionic permeability in the cell. So this is all about the role of calcium as secondary messenger. So we'll turn to the second part of these hormones. The second type of hormones that we have seen category wise is steroid hormones. Steroid hormones. Okay, so steroid hormones, they are chemical steroids, and as a result of that, steroids are lipids. They can enter the cell. The lipid bilayer of the cell doesn't act as a barrier for these hormones. Okay, so what does it mean? It means that they can enter the cell and they don't have cell surface receptors, rather they have cytoplasmic receptors. So they have cytoplasmic receptors. And we have already seen some examples of these steroid hormones: testosterone, male reproductive hormone; estrogen, female reproductive hormone; progesterone; cortisol, adrenocorticoids, and there are good number, but if you can remember these common also will do. So let us see an overview of how steroid hormones work. So let's say this is the lipid bilayer of a cell. So these hormones can enter the lipid bilayer. Doesn't act as a barrier. Being lipid in nature, they can directly come here, and in the cell they have cytoplasmic receptors. So these are the receptors where these hormones will come and bind. So you have a hormone receptor complex. In case of protein, what we saw that there were cell surface receptors like this. Because being protein, they cannot traverse the lipid bilayer. But since these are lipid itself themselves, they can enter the cell lipid bilayer, and they will come and bind to the cytoplasmic receptors, the one I have shown in yellow here, and bind. And this hormone receptor complex then travel to nucleus. So let's say this is nucleus, and within the nucleus, let's say you have the DNA. So this hormone receptor complex comes and bind to the specific region in the DNA, right? And then binding of hormone receptor complex to a region in the DNA is responsible for regulating the expression of a set of genes. Okay, about 50 to 100 genes, their expression will be regulated. Regulated का मतलब ये है कि अगर वो already express हो रही है तो they may be switched off, और वो अगर switched off है तो they may be switched on. Okay, not expressed से expressed और expressed से not expressed, दोनों चीजें हो सकती है. Expressed not expressed. अगर not expressed है they will be expressed, और अगर वो expressed है तो they will be switched off, right? So this is what we say that steroid hormones, they act at the molecular level. Protein hormones, on the other hand, they modify the activity of certain enzymes, certain target proteins, okay, channels, and therefore they are said to be acting at the cellular level. Protein enzymes act at the protein hormones act at the cellular level, whereas steroid hormones act at the molecular level. And since they act at the molecular level, they bind here. This will travel to the nucleus, bind to a specific region of the DNA, and then will cause expression. You will have mRNA synthesis. mRNA will come out, will get translated. Protein will be synthesized. It takes time. So the effect of steroid hormones to be visible takes time, whereas effect of protein hormone is visible immediately, quickly. Right? So this is the difference between the two. Now, this steroid hormone, these receptors have been isolated and purified. Receptors for different steroid hormones have been purified. isolated and purified. And what was found out that they have some, all of them have some common features. What are the common features? All of them have a 66 amino acid long DNA binding domain. And this domain in all the receptor is conserved, means same. It is with this region that the receptor will go and bind to the DNA. So besides the DNA binding domain, they have a hormone domain, hormone binding domain. And they will have a activation domain. This activation domain is variable. So it is the region which will interact with other factors. Okay. So they have three domains, of which the 66 amino acid long DNA binding domain is conserved. So for example, we have a glucocorticoid receptor. This is 595 amino acid long. Okay, so if I have to draw it for you, so this is amino acid number 1, N terminus, and this is amino acid number 595, C terminus. Okay, so at the towards the N terminus, it has got a activation domain. It has got a activation domain. This is the activation domain. Then somewhere in the middle, it has got a 66 amino acid DNA binding domain. DNA binding domain. And towards the C terminus, it has got a 240 amino acid long hormone binding domain. Okay, so this is activation domain. This is DNA binding domain, and this is hormone binding domain. Of these three, this is conserved in all the receptors. We are talking about glucocorticoid receptor. You will have a receptor for testosterone. You will have a receptor for estrogen, estradiol, progesterone, cortisol, adrenocorticoid hormone. All these different steroid hormones, each of them will have a specific receptor. All those receptors have been isolated and purified. And what was found out is that all of them have a common feature, and that feature is that they have a conserved 66 amino acid DNA binding domain. Okay, I have given you one example of this glucocorticoid receptor, which is 595 amino acid long, right? Now, after binding to the receptor, this hormone receptor complex, they travel to the nucleus, and they don't bind to the DNA at any random site. Randomly. They do not bind to DNA randomly. But there are specific binding sites that are called as hormone receptor elements. There are specific regions of the DNA. Basically, they are characterized by the presence of a palindrome. Palindromic sequence means a sequence of DNA which you when you read in opposite direction, it is the same. So a palindromic sequence about 6 base pair in length, separated by a 3 base pair spacer. So you will have a palindromic sequence of 6 base pair on one side, another palindrome on the other side, and in between, you will have a three nucleotide long spacer, 3 base pair spacer. It is something like this. So you have a 6 base pair palindrome, then you will have a 3 base pair spacer, and then again you will have a 6 base pair palindrome. So this one becomes a hormone response element, HRE. This whole thing becomes a hormone response element. So I will write down one hormone response element for glucocorticoid hormone. The hormone response element for glucocorticoid hormone, it looks like this. Okay, so this is the spacer that I am talking about, and any nucleotide. And then on the other this thing, you will have A, C, A, G, A. Like this. So this is HRE, hormone response element for glucocorticoid hormone. So glucocorticoid hormone with its complementary receptor, when this hormone receptor complex will go and bind to this sequence of DNA in the nucleus. It will not go and bind randomly. It will go and bind to this particular hormone response element. So why it is called as a palindrome? If you read it, for example, AGAACA, if you read it in this direction, AGAACA, okay, this is 5' to 3' in DNA, this is 3' to 5'. Right? So it will go and bind to this particular hormone response element, and after binding to it, it will cause the regulation or expression of a particular set of genes, 50 to 100. And this is how the steroid hormones, the biochemical basis. We have taken one example. Other steroid hormones will also have the same example. They will have a specific receptor in the cytoplasm. Receptor has one common feature, that they have a conserved DNA binding domain, with the help of which the receptor hormone complex will go and bind to the DNA. They don't